We're just going to chit chat first about cast iron skillets and how they can how efficient they cook. Isn't that right, Winston?
Well, yeah, one of the things they found out a long time ago was that people were iron deficient because when aluminum pots and pans came out and Teflon and all those things came out, and people stopped using iron skillets, and so a lot of people, including myself, in our families, we've gone back to using iron skillets just so to make sure we get that iron content in the food and stuff like that. So, like
Yeah.
I say, people abandon some of the old ways sometimes, and to their detriment. So,
True, and they're good for many uses, though. I find that they're
mm,
very good for blocking certain frequencies, sound frequencies in particular. But
yeah,
they're very heavy if you decide to sleep with them on your body. Okay,
well, sleep with them too. But I mean, if you have a home invader, would you rather hit them with an aluminum skillet or with a cast iron skillet?
I think I'd rather blast CNN on them and have them and I like, hey, if it worked for Rapunzel. Well, anyway, folks, welcome everyone to the Goldfish Report. I'm your host, Louisa, and today is Friday, August 24th, 2018. And this is our weekly Country Roads with Winston Shrout, our friend, and he is here with us. How are you, Winston?
Well, done pretty good. How about yourself?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Those cast iron skillets are quite heavy to be navigating at night, but sometimes we have to resort to getting our iron some way.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, folks, we have a few announcements at the top of our report today. Um, we have to inform everybody, and I'm going to screen share this really quick because everybody, for people who don't know, actually, kind of right at the time we were doing our POTUS report on Monday, we were actually being, our blog, the Goldfish Report blog, as I'm going to screen share, was deleted. You can see this is the message that appears when you try to go to the goldfishreport.wordpress.com. This is the blog that we had. And I've sent appeal letters several times and I've not heard back from them. However, I also want you to be aware that we do have a sister channel and a sister blog called the Canary Chronicles. So this is also someplace, and I can tell you that all of the reports have been published on Canary Chronicles, almost all of them, at least since March. So there is somewhat of a backup on here if you are looking for some older goldfish reports. But of course, you can always go to our BitChute channel here. Winston, did that come up?
Yes, it did.
Okay, so this is our BitChute channel here, and of course, we're also on YouTube. But if you go to our website, you'll definitely find all the links to our reports on our website at www.thegoldfishreport.com. So if you're not sure if you're on an official site, just go to the website and you can access any of our links that we have there, our Twitter page, our newsfeed, our 24/7 news page on Facebook. And so they're all there, folks. So you really should be able to find them all. And there's just a lot going on. I just wanted to point out in terms of the news and so forth, uh, things are definitely progressing. You can see forward movement progress, I would say, on the New World Order side, but there is equal progress on the Alliance, the Patriot, the U.S. Patriot side as well. So there really is a war at this time, and the president obviously cannot officially announce something like that. But it does look like that there was just a military police battalion that was deployed down to Guantanamo Bay. So I do believe, as the executive order would indicate, that these military tribunals are getting ready and set up, and they are going to be, ready to go come January, because I think that's when the executive order takes effect. So there's lots going on. They're going to keep, and I do suggest that there is going to be probably more censorship on the social media. The mainstream media, which is run by the Nazis that infiltrated our government in a coup d'état after JFK was assassinated, they have been taking over the country ever since. So this is the reality of it. So since they can't control the narrative on social media, they're going to delete anyone who would be talking about political views that would out them or would show, a contrary opinion to their own. So this is, the time when Americans in particular have to stand up to this kind of fascism, or this will all disappear. We're just not going to be here any longer to bring these reports to you if you allow. And really, it's up to you. Sadly, our politicians have been bought off. So they are not representing the constituents. It's just a show. So since our numbers are greater, it's up to us to do something about it. If you're going to wait for them to do it, it's not going to happen, because it's not happening right now. But I also warn that this is going to increase up until the midterm elections. This is a huge election, and the stakes couldn't be higher right now. And I just wanted to get the warning out to people to make sure you are somewhere safe on election night, because they are definitely going to, as they have been doing, inciting riots and violence. And they're going to do whatever they can, as we saw in that salvage plan from those leaked DNC server files, that there's a salvage plan out there to do all kinds of things to voters who are going to vote. And so including spreading Zika virus and attacking them with other kinds of weapons. And who knows if they're still going to, pull out this fake alien invasion, which was in their own files, in their own records. So I just wanted to put a warning out there to folks that if this were to happen, I can't imagine it would happen for a long period of time. I think Trump has had it as well. I think that there's got to be some enforcement at the FCC in order to prevent further infringement on our First Amendment freedom of speech. And we'll see where that goes, Winston. But hopefully, everybody will heed the warning and realize that, now is the time more than ever to be supportive of GoldFish Report, the Canary Chronicles, and other social media platforms, because pretty soon there are, why would they said that we violated some sort of community standard, Winston, but they didn't say what it was.
Their community standard.
Right.
The community they're in.
Well, I looked up what those terms of service were, and I didn't violate anything that they said.
Of course not.
We don't incite violence. We don't speak hate. We don't, we just give our points of view. Now, they're educated points of view, and if that violates their terms of service, apparently.
If you're looking for an excuse, any excuse will do. I mean, it's obvious to any reasonable person what they're doing, and they're already caught at it. I mean, the number of people across the country, it's obvious. How many people watch the television on the major networks as far as getting their news?
Yeah,
not very many.
This is the last. This is really the last battle. I mean, it's really good versus evil, as Q says. And this is where it's time to change the paradigm on this planet. We are going into a new fight.
Well, the paradigm has already changed.
Yeah. Well, and that's a great, that's a great segue into the topic we're going to talk about today. Winston's going to be talking about these provisions of NESARA and how they might help, or what we might be able to expect. Okay, so we'll be talking about what we might be able to expect. This is Winston's opinion regarding the provisions of NESARA, since we are in a new paradigm. And
your volume went down.
Oh, and did it really?
Yeah.
How's that now? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that, folks.
That sneeze must have wiped out your microphone.
I probably did. I'm so sorry. Yeah, it just came out of nowhere. So since we are in this new paradigm, since we can't have a new financial system with the corruption that we presently have. So this is what you're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about NESARA, the provisions of NESARA, and how what that might look like, what people might be able to expect.
Yeah, we thought we'd go into it a little bit today. Like I say, I talked, the last couple of times about, what the future looks like. I was complaining that we didn't have a disclosure on, for instance, just on the NESARA itself. See, let me put it this way: the spirit of NESARA, came from ascended masters, principally from Saint Germain, and so they've been inspiring people to do certain things, but the actual NESARA act itself was written by men or women, and so in consequence of that, I was, a little bit testy, if I can use that word, because I wanted to know, what exactly had been written. And, without disclosure of that, I felt like that myself and others, are basically being kept out in the dark. There may be some parts of that because again, it's written by men. God didn't write NESARA. And because it's written by men, there may be some, elements in there that might be objectionable. And without doubt, there are. And so I was just a little bit concerned that, without the opportunity to read it, then would I support it? And I had to say, no, I won't. Not until I see it. Now, various elements. Now today we're going to go over some of the elements which have been put forward as being a part of NESARA. And then as we look at some of the current events over the last couple of years, we see some of those very provisions being implemented at a certain level. And so it's obvious that it's being worked on. And so whether or not the full NESARA would ever be published until after the fact, I don't know. But as far as I can tell, looking at, and we'll go over some of that today, but as far as I can tell, some parts of that are actually being implemented even as we speak. So, that's a good thing, and I support that. But again, I would really like to be able to see it, because I don't like getting snuck up on.
Right. Well, the intent, though, right, because if they're doing it piecemeal, then we don't really know if it's really going to be NESARA as it was intended
Yeah.
in the end. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, again, like I say, the spirit behind it, I would have to be very supportive of, because I believe that it came from, Saint Germain and some of these others, from those higher dimensions, who would like to see these things implemented, in our country and across the planet, for the betterment of the world as we move toward ascension, on a planetary basis. But again, when we'll just look at this, we have, from time to time, we have, things that come from God, through prophets, as they were. We have the Old Testament prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and some of those. Then we have, going into the New Testament, we have some of the words we suppose of Jesus and Peter and Paul and some of those, but look what's come of it. I mean, what do we have now? Something like over 200 Christian churches. And so again, men take the words, that have a spiritual root, and then they construct, third dimensional things from those things. And we're just not altogether sure that we're doing a very good job with it. And so again, we would like to see, if they're going to actually start to enforce and implement the provisions of NESARA. Some of us, at least, would like to see that original. To see, number one, are they complying with it? Mm-hmm. And number two, are there parts of that we would find objectionable?
Well, there's no real oversight, Winston, is there?
No, not really.
Yeah.
So I think what I wanted to do today again was to perhaps go over some of, some of the provisions and so forth. But let's look at this one article first. Let's see, do the screen share deal here, make sure I got the right one I want to look at. And I think it's this one here. No, it's not this one here.
You know,
They had,
it just kind of boggles the mind when you realize that the ones who are running the negative, the you know, I guess you would say the more criminal aspects of the financial system, they're, I mean, especially because they know that this plan has been created and they know why it's created. They know there's changes. It's not like they don't really know it, but why cause so much, you know, pain and suffering on the way out? It's just their time's up. It's time for this golden age on this planet. And it just seems like they could benefit from the transition if they were smart, really smart.
yeah, like I say, the message of the gospel has always been to call all men to repent.
Yeah.
And so, so that is our continuing message. We're not out here condemning, everybody for every little thing and everything, but we would like to see people turn around and do better. Now,
Right.
the reason I bring this one article up here, there's some of the elements here I've highlighted, and we talked about these a little bit. Anyway, talking about the various masters who have been, involved in this, pushing this concept forward. And then there's a couple elements here, complex strategy and so forth. And then now the roots of NESARA can be found. And it says the roots of NESARA can be found in the response by the Supreme Court to banking foreclosures against farm property, which the court found to be illegal. Now, first thing, can any good thing come out of the Supreme Court? So we're watching that. We're watching that because the Supreme Court is very political, very political.
Very much so. Not supposed to be. It's supposed to be impartial.
Uh-huh. And
But
so
not.
that's why I say I want to see it,
Right.
and they're not letting us see it. And they point out that NESARA was due to be announced September 11th at 10 a.m., which and then the cabal blew up the World Trade Center buildings at 9 a.m. to prevent it.
Wow. I heard that before too.
Oh yeah, said they have been successful thus far in achieving delays by many means: assassinations of influential people who favor initiating the provisions without delay, as well as others actively working toward this end, death threats to the families of light workers and to workers themselves, double agents within the ranks of the light workers, and terrorist assaults. I think we've seen all this. It says the gold which backed the new currency was stored in the World Trade Center towers and stolen by the cabal. Now, at one of our seminars some years back, there was a fellow that came, and he was a crane operator, and he was working right there in New York City. He wasn't working on the World Trade Center exactly, but he's working close enough to it. He said for about 2 or 3 days there,
Hmm.
he said there were huge trucks, like 10-wheelers coming out from under World Trade Center. So they were stealing that gold before they brought the buildings down. And he supposed that they were removing that gold. So we have an eyewitness, at least, of an unusual bunch of heavy duty trucks coming out.
Mm.
And so it appears they were hauling the gold away. Where it went to, I don't know. Let's see here. Oops. Oh, this crazy computer.
Well, that's also supposed to come out too. I think the president has John Lear, who has you know, provided a written affidavit, a sworn affidavit, regarding his opinion regarding 9/11. I think, you know, it's all being, the president's being briefed on all the details of that, because
Yeah.
John Lear just recently said that he was providing some testimony, video testimony, to be submitted to the president for briefing on this. I think we have some disclosure that's coming very soon, very
Yeah.
very soon. Yeah, about all this.
And this provision here, this is, we've talked about this before. This is what we're trying to move to, and that's why I talked about, maybe we need to start learning how to do our commerce like the people from other places do. But anyway, the author of this article says after ascension, this planet is destined to be weaned from the use of money. Ultimately, you will reach a stage where money has no place in a society that is founded upon sharing. I think everybody pretty much agree with this. Let's see. Yeah, they rightly see NESARA as their total uprooting, because once the program's reforms are implemented, the control of the darkness will crumble totally. Mm-hmm. Okay, now here's something, we don't know what this is exactly, but we've talked about this in the past. I said, according to God's law, the coalition is bound until the arrival of a divine deadline. So again, we're talking about the actual movement of this planet. I mean, aside from all the crazy foolishness that people on the planet do, they can't control the movement of the planet through the universe, and we're into this high energy zone that's called the photon belt, and there are certain deadlines that have to be met, and if they're not met, those who can't meet them simply be destroyed. See, this is what James Gilliland always talks about being frequency specific to the changes. So that's why we've tried to encourage people to up their frequencies, their spirituality, and all those kind of things. And certainly that affirmation that St. Germain had sent to us through Scott Werner, I think that was really an important thing. So we're trying to up, our frequencies so that we can match the frequency of the planet. Otherwise, we won't be here, period. Well, let's see. We can tell you that what is fomenting behind the scenes regarding the truth about the global economy, but because Earth's energy field of potential is in such wild commotion, we cannot discern what information will emerge first or the order in which other facts will follow. Well, now this is the case. I mean, we just came out of this Lionsgate portal, and when those energies were released on the planet, all kinds of craziness was going on. I mean, it was wild, but that's shut up now, and so maybe things will settle down a little bit. But like this author is saying, they can't accurately predict, exactly what kind of foolishness we'll get into.
Got it.
The Illuminati's capitulation would be welcomed, but we are not of the nature to admit defeat. They are not in the nature to admit defeat. In the end, we may therefore have to force the issue, as our mission must soon start in earnest. Force is not a word we like, but it does mean the use of physical force, rather like your chess game. It will be a checkmate, and I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, and Trump is a master chess player too. I'll tell you, you never really see, what is his. You can't really tell what his moves are. And I know he's not the only chess player on the board, but he's not the only one.
Do you think all those strategies simply come from him or mere mortals?
No, I know he's got. Yeah, I mean, it's just that,
we got help. Is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, definitely. But he's not only. I don't think he's only just your typical presidential puppet. I think he is.
No.
I think he is very much a part of these decisions. I don't think he's the only one involved in making it. I think he respects and trusts the opinions of these, like you said, off-world or these higher sources of knowledge.
Yeah, I'm just sure of that.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, it says it was foreseen that the low vibrations on Earth would attract the dark ones, and what would result from it. Therefore, plans were made to remove them as soon as the light became the dominant energy and when their power was diminishing.
Right.
Now, I'll have to report that one of my friends was looking into some of the opposition to the release of what people call RV, but the currency redemption. He was looking into it, and he found one individual who was basically working out of the United Nations, and he saw darkness in the guy. So So I reported that to James. I said, take a look at this guy. It looks like there's, things need to be done.
Mm-hmm.
He went to work on it. I think he said at 10 o'clock in the morning, he had removed something like 91,000 dark entities out of this guy. He went back at noontime at 12 and removed another 70,000, because once you remove a bunch of them, not a lot of them come in.
Jeez.
And then he said he went back and looked again at 1 in the afternoon and said there's another 30,000 there. So he removed all those. So we do have some very talented people on the planet, and this is why they're always attacking him, because he is so powerful. And so people should be praying for James, his support, because he's constantly under attack. Luis says, well, we're all under attack, but we need talented people like James who have those capabilities. And so like I say, behind the scenes, the people would never know about unless some of us are willing to report it. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of work being done to clear the way. Let me put it that way, to clear the way so these things can move out.
Well, I just wanted to comment that last sentence that you had highlighted there, I had also, had the experience of associating with someone who was, I wouldn't say he was a yogi, but I would definitely put him close to that type of category, was really explaining how that Earth was kind of set up as a trap for the dark.
Yeah.
Just as they were, because and this would justify that, says because of the low vibrations here, that when it fell in vibration, then then they were able to trap them here in the lower frequency, and so therefore, just when they thought they were going to seize control, it would be snapped away from them. And really, that's what we're seeing happening. So it's really very much what's happening right now.
Yeah, there's been a lot of foolish things that have happened on our planet. One of the most foolish things certainly was the Philadelphia experience, where they ripped a hole in the space-time continuum and all kinds of crap came in. I mean, we had natural protections at one time to a certain extent, and then the idiots went and ripped holes. And then they started setting off all, not only atomic blasts, but they started setting off hydrogen blasts. And my goodness gracious, they got the attention all across the universe.
Right.
Because it blew holes, and so all this crap could come in that, before that, you simply couldn't get in. So now, people like James and so forth are having to go to work, to get some of this, stuff removed and whatnot. And, actually, I don't know, about 2 or 3 years ago, we were trying to do a certain thing, and James actually discovered a black hole, and he went to work with some of his friends from across the universe to plug that black hole up, because all these entities were coming through it.
Right.
And so, luckily for us here on planet Earth, we have people like James and others who are capable of doing these things, and they do it. That's why I say people should be very supportive, and pray for, send good energy, because again, look what he's doing for us that apparently we can't do for ourselves. And so we need to be very supportive, of those who are working, for our benefit.
Right.
And so what I wanted to do today was to look at, there's been, I think I have listed here as like 17 provisions that apparently have leaked out of the NESARA Act, and I want to analyze them and perhaps even discuss what's it going to look like on the other side of those things. I mean, how will we function once these provisions have been implemented and enforced? And so let's just take like I say, it's going to be kind of a conversation to basically analyze the provision itself, think about perhaps how it is or will be implemented, and then see what's on the other side of it. Let's see what's on the other side. Because again, we don't want to leave people out in a canoe in the middle of the lake without a paddle. So let's look at a few of the things perhaps.
Up the creek without the paddle. the
Yeah,
proverbial the proverbial creek, which is where we've been.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is this it? Let's see.
Bring us some paddles.
Nothing here. All right. Now I have here a list of about 17, 15, 17 different things,
Okay.
which has been speculated as being a part of NESARA and GESARA.
Mhm.
But again, we're not seeing it, so we don't really know. We're just only hoping that these provisions are a part of it, and I think probably they are.
Hmm.
So this is what we would call partial disclosure.
Okay.
And so anyway, let's just analyze some of this. Number one, it talks about zeroing out all credit card, mortgage, other bank debt due to illegal banking and government activities. Now, for those who have, listened to some of our previous reports, you know that everything in the public's prepaid. And certainly as we've talked about the problems associated with mortgages, credit cards, and some of these other things, you simply have to factor in, the concept of all these things are prepaid. And so, but, most people are not at that level of knowledge. I mean, I don't know how many people, that myself and others have been able to reach with these concepts, but certainly, accepted for value is fairly well known. It pops up here and there, and people ask questions about it. Then they come, and look at the information, the material, and so forth, and then try to implement it. So again, for the vast number of people, though, who have not been exposed to that concept, how will this affect them? I mean, will they? So you're just saying, well, on Monday I'm sitting in my house, making out my check for my mortgage payment. Then on Tuesday, all of a sudden, I get information I don't need to do that anymore. Okay, well, that's good.
Right.
That's real good. But why? See, and so again, people should, come to understand that. Now, people who don't understand that, say, well, all the mortgages are going to be paid off by money that comes from the St. Germain Trust. No, they're not going to pay any damn thing. Pardon my expression. They're not going to pay any darn thing off. Not at all. So why should the banks be paid off for a fraudulent mortgage?
Right.
And so some, have speculated, based upon what's being said here, that, monies are going to come from the St. Germain Trust to pay off all this stuff. They're not going to pay off any of it. It's already prepaid. And so, what declarations, what kind of enforcements would need to be done in order to guarantee that these things, happen. And so I think there's going to be some huge changes in banking. As we had mentioned in previous times, all these things will be accounted for, and all of the real money that's been stolen from people eventually will have to be returned to them, if they're still available on the planet, or perhaps to their heirs. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. But again, and then we had talked about, we hadn't gone into it extensively, but we had talked about the concept of the CAFR accounts, where all of the money that had been erroneously, given to the various government agencies through taxes, traffic fines, or whatever,
Right.
had actually been taken into private accounts. And there's a lot of money there. And so, I don't know what knowledge, the present administration might have of some of those things, but there's a gobs of money in what's called the CAFR funds.
Right.
And so,
Well, Winston, does this include also, I'm sorry for interrupting. Does this also include the school loans, things of that nature?
yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, like we had said, remember we had talked about applications
Right.
creating taxable events. And so you make an application for a student loan. The application is in the form of a promissory note. They're all promises to pay. So the only thing you can conclude from that an application is a promissory note. I mean, it just is. And so once you give them that promissory note and they collateralize on it, make money on that, why should you give them any more money? Well, they try to extort it out of you.
Right.
They try to extort it on false premises. And so again, an application, leads to a benefit privilege. And when you hear benefit privilege, it's called a taxable event. So if you're making payments on your student loans, your mortgages, or any other kind of thing, that's a tax. That's a tax on the benefit privilege. That's the logic that the opposition has been using all these years. So certainly as Solutions in Commerce and many, many others, we have been trying to educate people on this particular subject.
Right.
And so, like I say, we used to be able to kill a student loan using the administrative process, but then Obama come along and made the false statement that all student loans are federally insured, which is a complete lie. And so based on that, then we were unable to get rid of student loans using administrative processes. And so now we have to take extensive measures, because you can't even get rid of a student loan in a bankruptcy. How does that work? See? And so all you students out there that are getting ripped off, you can thank Mr. Obama for that.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I have for my graduate work, which of course our viewers know that I was blocked in the graduate program that I was in for public policy, which happens to be the polling institute, happens to be Monmouth University, that does the polling institute. And so I was in the policy program there. And so they didn't like my POTUS reports. They didn't like my reporting on the president. And as soon as I started doing POTUS reports, really pretty much as soon as Trump got into office, and I was doing, reports, reporting the truth and reporting, things that was not in the liberal agenda of the university, they blocked me from registering. And so my student loan payment is now $3,000 a month. It's not possible. I mean, and I didn't get to finish because I've been blocked. I couldn't re-register, and it's really not. We're at war. We're definitely at war. This is not.
Yeah. First off, they didn't loan you any money. That's the whole premise.
Yeah.
They never did. Did they give you a check? Say, here, go spend this? No, they didn't do it. Now, again, trying to figure out exactly how this will be accomplished. I don't actually know, what the new interim government will do to abolish these mortgages and all this other stuff under NESARA. I'm not exactly sure what tact they will take, but I do know the premise upon which it would work that way. And so again, looking on the other side of this, when we start to talk, well, okay, so let's say, everybody's mortgages gets, zeroed out. Okay, that's great. So the day after that, when somebody goes to buy a house, will they actually buy it? Will they purchase it? How will that work?
Right. What's the
process?
process?
We don't know. We don't know at this point how that's going to work after the fact. In other words, will the mortgage system as it presently exist past this? And I would say no, but I'm not exactly sure how it will work after that.
Right. Well, if you were to, based on what you know and the double ledger accounting system, what ought to happen in your opinion, Winston?
Well, like I say, my co-worker in the Office of International Treasury Control, Keith Scott, he came up with a formula how that would work. Okay. And he's presented it to a few governments at this point, whether or not, his program would be how it would be adopted or not, I don't know. But let me basically just describe. In other words, he was actually wanting to use the post office instead of the banks. For instance, let's say you go and want to purchase, a house, and then your mortgage contract would actually be through the post office, who would monetize the note. Because, the post office is a bank. And then anyway, the payments on the mortgage would actually be paid to the national treasury. And so it's actually the treasury, the people in the country that would benefit from your payments on your mortgage. And so he's presented that to 2 or 3 different countries, and some of them seem like they have pretty good interest in it. But anyway, what he was doing, certainly by using the post office, he was cutting the commercial banks completely out of the equation. Now that's a workable system. Now whether he would be called on, internationally to present that kind of concept or not, I don't know. But he does have a formula that would work.
I was looking more for like, um, going to then the post office instead of the banks, but having a credit for because it's prepaid, so having a credit for a home, that certain things would be credited to you, not everything in life, but your basic essentials. Everyone needs a home.
Well,
If that's
yeah, but
prepaid, why would we pay a mortgage on it? See, I don't understand that.
well, like I say, there's a whole lot of things to consider here, but I'm just mentioning, what Keith, had formulated as a workable solution to our present situation. So the question gets to be, once we get past this zeroing out of the present mortgages, how would it actually work? Because nothing's for free. If you want a house, or if you want property and all these kind of things, should it just be handed to you, or should you have to work for it? Because again, we've always found that if people don't invest, then they won't appreciate what they have. So no, we're not giving away houses or anything else for free. The only question is where will the benefit, be paid to? And so using Keith's program, the mortgage payment itself would actually be given to your national treasury, which would only enhance the value of your nation and the currency and so forth, make it stronger all the time.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, but if everything is prepaid, this isn't making sense.
Well, okay, let me explain again. Everything
Okay.
in the public is prepaid. Now
In the
this
public.
has, yeah,
Okay.
these are things we've had to work with our present system. I'm talking about getting past the zeroing out of some of these things. How would it actually work? And so Keith's suggestion is, using this process, that the people would be making their quote unquote mortgage payments, and certainly like he projected, if you take the banks out of the equation, for instance, if you look at a typical 30-year mortgage, you spend the first 10 years just paying off the interest.
Yep.
And so he's going to eliminate that. And so he projected, let's say, for instance, if somebody under our present system was making a monthly house payment, let's say of $2,000, he projected that using this other system in the way that he had mentioned, that payment would go down to perhaps as low as 500 or even 300 a month payment. And he says that can easily be taken care of in 15 years. And he says, then if people wanted to pay it off quicker than that, that'd be up to them. But he did say, by using the system that he had developed, of course, I haven't described it exactly, all the points of it, like what he has, but he projected that by using that system, a typical monthly mortgage payment of $2,000 could be reduced easily to about 500.
What about people who don't own homes? What
Well,
happens?
let's not go into all that. We're not going to I don't spend all my time in it with all the
Okay.
different things. But I'm just saying, once we
Okay.
get past this, is there a way that we could institute a system that would be workable? And the answer to it is yes. Here's one instance of how that could work. Okay. So again, we expect that once we get past, this problem, that there'll have to be some kind of program instituted, for real estate, for homes or farms or whatever. And so I'm just saying, yeah, there have been plans made. Whether or not it'll end up the way Keith is saying or not, I don't know. But he's a forward thinker. He's a forward thinker, and he's saying, okay, here's something, here's how it could work, and here's the benefit from it. So again, once you take the interest out of the whole equation, he said, instead of a 30-year mortgage, said this would look like a 15-year mortgage, and then if people wanted to pay it off quicker than that, they certainly, there'd be no objection for them to do it. But we're not giving things away for free. That's the point, because of the demoralization that would come from it. See, we're not communists. We're not doing the communist socialist crap. So anyway, that's one of the elements. Apparently, that's a part of NESARA. So we'll wait and see how it works out. I mean, once these credit cards are zeroed out, will we go back to using credit cards again? I don't know. I don't know how they're going to set that up. But again, you can't solve a problem and then go back and do it the same way that caused the problem. So there's going to have to be some changes, in the way that people think, the way that people carry on their business and so forth. I know people who simply have a vision of economy simply using credit cards. I mean, the mentality. I mean, I used to work with some guys who had a business. They were killing credit cards, and people that would come to their business, typically would have 5, 6, or 7 different credit cards they were using. And does that make sense? So sometimes people simply have become philosophically attached to that way of doing business, and so once these credit cards are zeroed out, will we still do that kind of thing? And I doubt it. So we'll see what comes up with some of those things. Anyway, let's get on to some of these others. The second one here, we're talking about NESARA supposedly abolishes income tax. Well, that's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as income tax anyway. The word income tax has never been defined. Never. And, people have tried, to get the government, the IRS, or whomever to say, well, what do you mean when you say income? They can't define it. They never have. And so to say abolish income tax, that's an oxymoron, because there is no such thing. You can't abolish something that don't exist. But you see the point, though. You see the point. And so people are going to have to be educated, because remember, we spent so much time and have spent so much time talking about original issue. When you go out and labor and receive compensation for your labor, you've created original issue. Now, how can you tax original issue? And so we've talked about, some of the systems that they've used to do that. But again, there is no such thing as income tax, and never was. Anyway, this is kind of thought-provoking. Now, here's the next one that, should interest people. Abolishes the IRS. Like I say, people generally don't know the IRS is a private company. And they're actually held by a holding company known as Northern Trust Corporation. And I've kind of dealt with that. I haven't told this too much, but I'm holding a very, very, very large commercial lien against Northern Trust. And that is in the hands of the IMF at this point. And so here I think it was last October or last fall anyway, people don't know it. I mean, the Congress got after them. Congress is hot after the IRS for all the stuff they've been doing, Obama had used and weaponized the IRS to attack his political opponents, so the Congress was jumping on their backs over that. You go, it was on the internet. You can see all the different things. But again, for all intents and purposes, the IRS has already been abolished. Now, people keep saying, and I want to warn people about this, and that is I've had several phone calls in the last, month or 2 or 3 months and so forth like that. And people say, well, we keep getting all these letters and all this stuff from the IRS. And I say, no, you didn't. Because I was matter of fact, I was talking to one fellow yesterday. And he said he had gotten a letter from some lady in the IRS saying he owed this money or that money, all that kind of stuff. I said, really? I said, did you check her out? He said, well, it's kind of funny. He said, she changed her address from the IRS building to some building down here, some office building down here on a certain street. I said, really? I said, how about going down there and see if you can talk to that quote unquote IRS lady? Because what I think has happened, I can't prove it yet, but it's starting to look to me like that a lot of these ex-IRS agents and so forth are simply running a scam on people. That is, they're using IRS letterhead, they're using IRS, stationery or whatever, and they're acting as rogue agents, hoping that somebody will be stupid enough to send them money. I think that's what's happening. Now, like I say, I can't prove it yet. I keep telling people, go check them out.
Well, there has been a lot of warnings about that. A lot of warnings about stating that you owe money and you shouldn't, and you need to reset your passwords, and you need to go to this link to do it, and not to do that, because they're never going to do that. They're not going to solicit you that way, and the IRS isn't going to call you on the phone. That's not their.
Yeah, but people are getting letters they think comes from the IRS. I keep telling them it's not. Yeah. I said I can. They said, well, they went and put a lien in as county recorders. Me a notice of lien. I said, I can do that. I can do that. I said, go check them out. For instance, one lady called me, said, she'd set up this IRS agent, supposedly was, saying, give me money, send me money and all this kind of stuff. And she had actually set up 3 separate meetings. And this lady went to the meetings, and this lady never ever showed up. Ever. So I mean, if you can't prove up on these people that are claiming they're IRS agents or IRS this or that or the other, you better go check them out. Because, like I say, there's a whole lot of scamming going on, and that's the impression I'm getting. That some of these IRS agents and stuff like that are simply scamming the people.
I think you're right.
Because they're out of jobs.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, like I say, if people are listening to this and you're getting letters from the IRS and stuff like that, go check it out. Like I was talking to this guy yesterday about it, and I said, well, go down to her office and see if she really exists. Because again, her address had changed from the old IRS building to some office building downtown. I said, well, go down there, go to the office. And I said, take your cell phone with you. And if you do find somebody down there, take a picture of them. And then I said, let's see. I was going to say something about that. Oh, I said, why don't you just go and sue in small claim court? Sue this party in small claim court and see if they show up.
Right, because then you can get a judgment to dismiss it. They could never claim that again.
Exactly.
That claim.
I said, if somebody shows up, make sure they produce identification. But I said, I'm going to guarantee you, if you go down here just a small claim court and sue this particular party, for whatever money and stuff it was, that they were trying to get you to send to them, and they don't show up, or an attorney for the, a U.S. attorney don't show up, what does that tell you?
Yeah.
They don't exist.
Well, you know what Aaron Russo did, he was the producer of the movie America Freedom to Fascism. Yeah. He was documenting this, and that there was no law. I mean, supposedly they claim all income tax is voluntary, and we know that it isn't. So, I mean, by, the head of a by the barrel of a gun, right? You're saying in one of our previous reports that we are having this tyranny implemented. And he went into the office of the IRS with a camera crew, and they were not happy. They were not happy because he was trying to validate this. Is this true? Is this supposed to be voluntary? And I remember watching the video, and I think it's still on YouTube,
Yeah.
regarding this. And of course, it wasn't that long after that he contracted some kind of incurable cancer and died. So, that's very unfortunate. But he did document this, and so you're right. So I am all for this component. It's just been a really we've been hoodwinked, and it's such a hijacking of every of our energy, like you said, Winston. It's of
But
our energy.
there is a good side to it. Let me express
Mhm.
my opinion, so I can start this as a rumor, but I think it's true,
Hmm.
or I wouldn't be saying it.
Okay.
And that was, we had learned some number of years ago that the IRS was running a criminal file on all the judges and prosecutors because they're all guilty of crimes. And so the IRS personnel have been investigating these individuals, judges, and so forth, so that if the IRS had a case in their court, they could use that criminal file as leverage to make sure the judge ruled in their favor. And
Wow.
and that's what was happening. But the benefit of it was
Mm.
when the new interim government took over the IRS and all their files and everything, they had all of the criminal evidence. Why do you think that this Huber guy there in Utah is pumping out sealed indictments left and right?
Right.
He got all the IRS files on all these criminals.
Well, we also know that these leaked documents from the DNC server are also showing where all the TARP funds went. And we're talking all of the major brokerage houses, people like Barney Franks, all kinds of people who received, I mean, even, state politicians,
Oh yeah,
not just Congress, but
oh
state
yeah,
politicians receiving, multiple accounts, multi-millions of dollars of all these TARP funds. All this, the money that was used to bail out the last financial disaster, went into the pockets of all the politicians, or many of them. Folks, this is right before your eyes. I mean, it's amazing that people don't really inquire about it. I don't blame you, because it seems hopeless. I think people just gave up on politics and holding these elected officials accountable. But it's all going to come out soon. We're all in for a big surprise for those of
yeah,
us who didn't know about this before.
yeah. Well, it's unfortunate, but they've finally been caught up with.
Mm.
So let me go back to this. Let's move past this that particular thing and get back to what we were looking at here a minute ago. Uh, no, that's not it. Hold on. Got so many things open on my computer. I don't.
I hear you. And I definitely have a list of those TARP funds, those people. I did
That's
copy
it.
it off the
Why do I
internet.
keep coming up with that?
It's a message from above, Winston.
Well, it's
They
yeah, but
want you to talk about it. I don't know.
no, I don't think so. That's not something we
Okay.
would talk about here. It's
While you're
it's
doing that, maybe I'll pull up this file that shows where these TARP funds have gone, just for people's own interest. Maybe they might be interested
okay. Yeah, go ahead if you
like
want to.
that.
Let me
Yeah, I'm gonna see if we can do that real quick. And usually we don't do this, but um,
document 8. Okay, I see it now. Go
oh, you
ahead.
got it?
Go
No,
ahead and do your thing, and I'll bring this back up. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I've got to find the file. Hold on a
Like I
second.
say,
Mhm.
this is kind of an open forum here, so go ahead if you find that. Because people would want to see
Right.
that.
Yeah, no, no, no. It's quite compelling. I just need to locate I need to locate this on my computer here, and it's not. Ooh, so
You
much.
want to put it on hold for a minute then
Okay,
so
why
you can
don't I
find
go
it?
ahead and do that? Yeah, I'll do that real quick. Okay.
Okay, let's look at some of these other provisions. Uh, now I'm having the same problem where to go to, and now I'm having the same problem.
Yeah, they're
Here
playing.
it
They're
is.
in our
Here it
computers
is.
or
Here it is.
something.
Here it is. We're back to it now.
Okay.
Anyway, as another solution of NESARA, what they're talking about is a flat rate, what's called non-essential uh, a sales tax. That would be on first sale of non-essential items. The essential items, again, are food, clothing, shelter, and the different things that go with that. Uh, but anyway, on new non-essentials, now that doesn't talk about second sale. And so, for instance, you wouldn't be paying any sales tax on a used car.
Hmm.
Or
Oh, okay.
if you went to a secondhand store to get a television or whatever, that there would be a sales tax on the first sale of non-essential. So again, this is going to be one of the ways that the government would be funding themselves, and then certainly if they keep up with this business about tariffs and so forth. And see, originally the government was to be funded by tariff
Hmm.
and sale of public land. That's how they were going to fund the government. Then they come up with all this other crazy foolishness
Hmm.
later on. So again, when we get on the other side of this, then expect that if you want, a new flat screen television or whatever, or jewelry, or
Hmm.
I don't know, whatever, that there will be a 14% sales tax on that item. Okay. All right. Now this next one here, for those of us, increase the benefits to senior citizens. Now, how that's going to happen, I don't know. But they're talking about, for instance, people that are over a certain age and have no other means of income except for Social Security or some kind of pension or something like that, and are forced into a nursing home type situation. A lot of those situations are not all that good. I mean, very disrespectful of our senior citizens who have lived their whole life and made a contribution. And so they're going to be looking at, solving that problem. I mean, I don't know exactly, how it's going to roll out, but they're talking about increased benefits, for senior citizens. One of which is me. Like I say, but a lot of people, a lot of older people, they don't get the proper medical attention. They can't afford to go to the dentist. Medicare and all these kind of things. Don't provide for adequate
Hmm. True.
treatment of our senior citizens. So apparently, there are going to be some steps taken to guarantee that we take care of our senior citizen population. And that's really important. I mean, you look at other cultures, that there might be 3 generations living in the household, but they take care of the old people. They don't cast them out. They don't leave them, on the doorstep of some nursing home someplace. But they're very, very respectful
Hmm.
of those who have, spent their life, building things up and so forth and so on. So, again, this is one of the anomalies that's happened in our country because of the tendency of the young people to simply just move away someplace else and leave the previous generation to fend for themselves. In many instances, they do very well with it. I mean, a lot of the old, a lot of the senior people and so forth have provided. For instance, my parents were very careful. So when they got to that age, I mean, they could live very comfortably in the circumstance they have built for themselves. But many others are not that way. There's many of the older generation that are simply left. And it's tragic. It's really
Well,
tragic.
it's
It's
tragic.
disrespectful.
It is disrespectful, and it's unfortunate because we oftentimes have to move away to find jobs. And so that is,
Yeah.
and then the problem is when your parent doesn't want to move because they don't like where you're going, that creates a rift and a problem. They end up sometimes alone because
Hmm.
they don't want to be inconvenienced. And sadly, I mean, I even deal with that issue with my own mother. I mean, it's kind of like, there in our own parents, there's times we all have to confront those issues of them not wanting to change, not wanting to move
True.
with you, not wanting to move with you, and putting themselves in harm's way, actually. And
Yeah.
yeah, so what are you going to do?
Well, a lot of that has to do with moving away from an agricultural society or
Absolutely.
culture.
Yes, it is.
For instance, I look at my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, again, they were agriculturally based. My father's mother, she was
Mm-hmm.
fiercely independent, because her husband had died early on, and she'd had to raise the family on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And then when all the kids were gone, then she remained that way, and she was fiercely independent.
Yeah.
I mean, finally, my aunt, brought a plumber in and put indoor toilet into her house because she was going down the step to the outhouse, and she didn't think it was right for people to be pooping in the house. So my aunt, because she finally got to the point that she was afraid, especially in wintertime. She'd be going up and down those back steps to the outhouse, and finally my aunt said, no more of this. And so she brought in a plumber, and they put in an indoor toilet so she wouldn't be going outside to the out. But she was fiercely independent, fiercely.
Mm.
And so you run into some of those kind of situations or whatnot, with that generation of people. And then of course my parents, were careful. We're careful that when they got to the place, where they would be, senior citizens, so that they had adequately provided an environment, but it's not the same way with all people. And so we have to be very careful as a culture not to disrespect the older generation. Culturally and morally, it will degrade your society if you do that.
It's just a sign of the times, Winston. And I just came across a patent yesterday for growing crops in aluminum rich soil. I mean,
Oh, geez.
I'm telling you, this is this is very different world. I don't know how our grandparents would you know adapt if they were still here and had to try to live in a society where the dirt itself is too nutrient poor to
Yeah.
actually grow anything of any nutritional value.
Yeah.
So this is what we're faced today. This is not,
Yeah.
but
New
that's
challenges all the time.
it is, and these are the changes. This is why it's like we either accept this fascism that's being implemented on us, or we reject it. Because as you can see, as Winston and I have this conversation, uh, the 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 quality of life is diminished on this planet because of the fascism and the planned transhumanism, and the controllers who want to depopulate this earth, and these are the mechanisms by which they're doing it. So
Yeah.
the fact is, the hidden hand is being revealed. This is the apocalypse, the great awakening of everyone, revealing all of these things that were hidden. And it's time for us to take our own responsibility, folks. If we're going to sit around and wait for other people to do it, then you're going to be stuck with whatever plans they have for you. So if you don't, and I mean in a very nonviolent way, because violence isn't going to provide a quality of life. We have to put our thoughts together. We have to put our minds together and come up with workable solutions. And we have to reject these GMOs, the spraying in our skies, and all of the things that are destroying our ability to have a quality of life
Yeah.
on this planet. Because it sounds, how great it would be, if we had soil rich enough to actually grow something that had some nutrition in it. So this is what's happened because people have turned and looked the other way. So we've become sadly accustomed to becoming dependent, codependent on the government, which is exactly what their engineering plan was.
Yeah.
So we need to take self-responsibility, which is what Winston talks about in all these country roads reports, is taking responsibility, taking having full liability. And that's really why it's more important now than ever before to realize it and to do it, to take full responsibility, because we're going to lose what has been so precious to us. We don't know how far it's going to go. We know we're in the midst of changes, but we don't know how far it's going to go. But really, it's up to all of us to determine that. So everybody has to play a role. Winston and I play this role, and everybody can play a role in being the voice that says, stop this now, we don't want this. How bad can it get? We don't know, but we're hoping it isn't going to get to such an extreme degree that that there will be even much more suffering. I think we've had enough.
Yeah. Like I say, today is more of a commentary than it is an educational thing. And
Right.
we're trying to, like I say, the purpose, that I had today was to basically say, what's on the other side of NESARA?
Right.
What's on the other side? How will we live? How will we act? What will things be like? Because you got to plan for those things. You have
Right.
to plan for them.
But we have to fix some problems here. So
Yeah, but once the problem's fixed,
problems.
now what will we do?
Right.
That's the question. And so that's kind of the flavor of today's report. Just to, again, like I said in the past, in essence, not everything's done yet, but in essence, we have won the war. What will it take to win the peace? And so on the other side of the sorrow, what I'm trying to ask is, what will things look like? How will we act? What will we do differently? That's the question. And so many people have not been exposed to alternative to the crap that we have.
Right.
They basically have no idea what, it's like waking up out of a dream or something. They say, oh, gee, now what will I do?
Well,
So
people
we're
don't
trying to
even.
give people a few hints of what they could do.
I know, but a lot of people don't even know what kind of,
I know.
crap that we have. That's what we're also trying to do, is wake them up and realize that, look, our soil's being depleted, our grounds are being flooded because of these earth changes. We're going to have to learn how to go back to basics, like you're saying, Winston, grow agriculture ourselves, become more self-responsible.
Yeah. So let's go ahead with a little bit more of this. This next item 5 here, I think is poorly worded
Mm,
because it says return constitutional. There is no such thing as constitutional law. Law comes out of the Congress by enactment, statutes at large and stuff. The Constitution has no law in it. So this author, I think I get the flavor for what they're trying to say. But let's go on the other side of this and say, well, what kind of law would we
right.
expect on
Hmm.
the other side of this? And I have suggested, and I'm still suggesting it, that it probably be heavily weighed toward equity. In other
Right.
words, what ought to be done.
Hmm. Right.
And so again, all law comes from contract. And so once this NESARA thing comes, and it's announced and all these kind of things, what contract are we operating under? Again, because all law comes from contract, as I mentioned. Law is only a remedy. It's a remedy for breach of contract. What contract? Is it a social contract? Is it a moral contract? Is it something we actually sign? So forth. But we have to look at these things very carefully. And so I would suggest that probably there'll be things will be heavily weighed toward the concept of equity. In other words, what ought to be done about this or that, more than this cut and dry black and white, concept of law or what people call law. Because again, we've been so statutized
Yeah.
that people simply have no idea what a law actually is. So these are all things we have to think about. when we get on the other side of this.
Well, I think what that could also mean is that, no one is above the law, because right now we're looking at, we're looking
What
at
law?
well, the implementation of the statutes, the enforcement of
Those
statutes.
are all going away. Those are all legally. Those are all illegal.
Well, we're talking about breach of, okay, if you want to talk about equity, I'm just trying to put this into context for people, and myself included. If we're talking about people who take oaths of office and people who violate those oaths, then how are we supposed to frame that? Under what form of justice do we frame that?
Well, like I say, in our present system, we have bonding, we have scope of office, we have recall, all these kind of different things that we could implement,
Hmm.
which are very rarely used, I might add. But on the
Right.
other side of, like I said, when I think this last report we did, or maybe the time before that, I had said the new interim government
Right.
that the military has put in force. The only thing that I've seen, from them is a new treasury.
Hmm.
I don't know. Are they going to? Do they have a legislative branch of that interim government? Do they have an exact? What do they have? And they haven't told us. They haven't told us. And so I would have to suggest there's going to be, they're going to have to come out and say, what it is they intend to do. Because again, the reason things were set up the way they were in the first instance was by some of the best minds on the planet came together and said, this is how we need to structure this. And so people like, Jefferson, Adams, and all those different ones said, well, this is how we need to structure this. We need to have, three branches of government, which was incorrect. It was actually four branches of
Four.
government.
Right.
The fourth branch of government that people don't conceptualize is the Treasury. That's who pays all the other three. So,
Right.
so which one is the most powerful of those four? It's the Treasury. Now, this interim government, the first thing they went to work on was setting up a Treasury. But what are the other elements? Have they copied the previous model? I don't know. They haven't told us. They're not telling us. But anyway, what this next item here goes into talks about NESARA establishes new presidential and congressional elections within 120 days after the announcement.
Hmm.
Well, that would kind of hint that we're going to have an executive. That would kind of hint that we're going to have a legislative.
Right.
That's what it's hinting at.
Sure. Implying that.
And that's the implication that you would get from this one provision right here. But we don't know about that yet, and so we're kind of just waiting to watch. And so if we have a new election for the executive branch, and then we have a new election for the congressional thing, will it be set up the same way? In other words, with Senate and the House, will it be the two separate elements there? We don't know.
Mm.
And the next question you have to ask is, all that stuff necessary anyway? Well, we don't want to repeat
Right.
what we did before. So what provisions would be made to guarantee that we simply just don't repeat what we had before? These are all things that people need to evaluate. They need to look at this and say, well, is this what we want, or do we want something, just a little bit different than that? I
Mm.
mean, do we need two senators from every state? I mean, you got some states that have huge populations, and they try to provide for that by the number of representatives from those respective states. For instance, I don't know how many representatives Rhode Island has as compared to Texas.
Mm.
I mean, that's how they tried to, level the playing field for the various populations in the various states. Or will we even have states? Is that necessary? I don't know. Like I say, we're just speculating on a lot of these different things because because of what we previously had. But will all those things be necessary under NESARA? I don't know. But it's the implication here is, number one, we know we got a treasury. Okay. They're implying here we're going to have presidential and congressional elections. Okay. Are we going to have a Supreme Court? Are we going to have a Department of Justice? Are we going to have all these kind of things? I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know how it's going to be set up. But obviously, we don't need 50% of the population working for the government now, do we? So obviously, things have to change in respect to that. Will there be a Bureau of Land Management? Will there be a Forestry Service? All these things we have to think about. And so again, probably there would be a certain continuation of most of these things,
Mm-hmm.
but will they be in the same form that they are today? I doubt it. I doubt it.
We definitely need a transition if no matter
Yeah,
what the change ultimately is, we
it's
can't
going to take
just
a
no.
while. It's going to
Yeah,
take a while. Uh-huh.
right. Hmm.
And I would hope that responsible people, who have full responsibility for themselves, would step forward and say, look, I'm willing to go out here and do this or that, for 6 months or 9 months or a year. Then I'm going to turn to somebody else. God, we have a professional bureaucracy, and look what has gotten us. See, we have a professional bureaucracy. People call them the deep state, and all kinds of different things. But we don't want that no more. So how will we
Right.
overcome the possibility that it could evolve into that? And so these are things we need to take a look at. And so people need to, you know, consider it. And then talks about here, oops, uh, uh,
I think we're
the
at number 8. Yeah. Oh
no
no,
number
I'm sorry,
7 here.
7. Okay.
Yeah, monitor of election prevents illegal election activities, special interest groups. I would have to suggest that all of these things like professional lobbyists, all these different groups and everything that have been formed to influence Congress and all these kind of things would have to be outlawed.
Yeah, the think tanks, absolutely, because
Oh
they're
yeah,
run by foreign governments. They're paid for by
yeah,
foreign governments, particularly Israel, who has infiltrated many of the lobbying groups and think
yeah.
tanks.
None of this dual citizenship BS anymore.
Right, right. This has to
That
change.
don't work.
Nope,
And certainly the Council on Foreign Relations and
that's
all
gotta go.
Bilderbergers and all that bunch,
Gotta
they got to be out of here.
go. Out. Exactly.
Those things can no longer continue to exist. And then I think they should probably get a major construction company with a bunch of D9 bulldozers and go completely bulldoze down the Bohemian Grove, turn it back to a wilderness. Things like that. We
Exactly.
simply can't continue to have these things.
Mm, exactly.
So, like I say, there's going to be a lot of changes. Anyway, monitor elections. Probably if we go back to paper ballots, instead of all this electronic stuff that can be manipulated. I mean, it's a burden. It's a burden, to count, paper ballots and stuff. But if you don't do that, then what's going to happen? Like I said, I don't know. It's been I don't know about maybe 5 years ago. I was watching this guy. It was they probably took it off the internet altogether. But there was a trial. I think it was in maybe Ohio or someplace, and somebody had sued the elections and all this kind of stuff. And they called this one guy to the witness stand. He worked for a company
Mm.
that had created electronic programs administered from satellites to control the electronic voting machines. He got right up on the stand and testified to it. Said, "Yes, I'm one of the programmers that did that."
Yes, I remember you talking about this.
And so what more evidence do you need that this electronic stuff is probably not going to be something we want to continue with.
Well, there was also an email, just to back that up a little bit more, there was also an email in this leaked server information, these
Mm-hmm.
emails talking about the rigging of the election, talking about
Yeah,
the changing of the computers of doing something. I mean, it's in bold, and I will talk about it at the appropriate time. I have seen that has come across my desk or computer screen from the internet, so it's all out there. It's all out there.
yeah. Yeah, if you recall back when the Trump and Hillary Clinton election, what was it that made Hillary so mad? See, what they were trying to do with the electronics was they were trying to have Hillary win by just a small margin, such as 2 or 3%, so that it would not look like they had completely rigged the whole deal.
Mm.
And whoever was trying to rig, the 2 or 3%, apparently got it wrong, and Hillary blew her stack over it because she knew it was rigged in her favor, for 2 or 3% to make it look right. But it didn't, somehow or the other, the ETs intervened so that that didn't happen. And so that's one of the things that she was absolutely blowing her stack over, because she was accusing, the people that was supposed to have rigged it for the 2 or 3% of screwing up. They didn't screw up. The ETs intervened and prevented them. That's what happened. So again, like I say, would those kind of problems come up if we actually had paper ballots? And then I would suggest that some of those things would be overcome. So again, when we get on the other side of this, what will we expect,
Mm.
to make things fair? And so if they're talking about monitoring elections and preventing illegal election activities, then probably there's going to have to be some changes made in the manner in which people are actually able to cast a ballot. That only makes good sense. Then again, this talk about, this article, the people that put some of this together, this is pretty old. They were still talking about the rainbow currency. You can call it rainbow currency or whatever you want to call it, but now we know it as the Treasury Reserve notes and also the United States notes, which I have been informed. The latest rumor is United States notes are going to be put out this coming week.
Ooh, that would be interesting.
Yeah, there's some indications that would be the case.
It'd be great to see some progress somewhere, like that's
Yeah.
more visible to the average Joe.
Well, this has been one of my big objections, because I know that, let's see, gosh, the Federal Reserve note actually went completely dead, I think, last September the 1st. And so what they did to prop up the use of the Federal Reserve notes, they said, well, they're backed by United States notes. I said, well, for hell's sakes, why don't you just go and put out the United States
Exactly.
notes then?
Right, that's what they were saying.
Because they were floating.
Yes,
They were
floating.
floating the FRNs,
Yep.
because you see, here's the deal. Here's the deal.
Mhm.
And that is that when the United States notes come out for domestic use, there'll be a 1-to-1 par switch. In other words, if you've got, say $100 in your bank account,
Mm.
when they switch to the United States notes, you'll have $100 in the United States notes in your bank account. Not so foreign. Last I heard, there's going to be something like a 55% discount on foreign held FRNs, a
Right.
good part of which are counterfeit anyway. And so, I mean, there are literally warehouses of Federal Reserve notes in Saudi Arabia, Dubai. They literally got warehouses full of that stuff. And
Mm.
so all of a sudden they're going to have to take a 55% discount on that, and they're making them hopping mad. And so again, we got international implications about the Federal Reserve notes. And so, if they hold it at 55%, it's really going to cause a huge impact across the globe. So I don't know what they're doing about that as far as foreign held Federal Reserve notes versus
Right.
domestic. Because, when all that stuff first started, a lot of these companies and stuff were trying to bring they were trying to repatriate their money back to the United States because they didn't want to take that 55% discount. For instance, if you got a Swiss bank account that's denominated in U.S. dollars,
Right.
and you have to take a 55% discount, that's going to take a pretty good bite.
Sure
Take a
will.
pretty good bite. And so a lot of these different ones that had those things were trying to figure out some way to repatriate that money.
Hmm.
And so, when Trump is talking about repatriation of billions and billions of dollars, some of that was people just trying to get their money back on the shore. That's all they were trying to do. So again, like I say, looking on the other side, what will we expect and so forth. And so we're just trying to evaluate, some of the things that people ought to be looking for. And then number 9, they say initiate the new U.S. Treasury bank system in alignment with constitutional law. Well, we talked about this, with the interim government, the new Treasury there on the Indian reservation in Reno. And we talked about some of the history of how that came about, so we don't need to go back over that. Eliminate the Federal Reserve System. Yeah, the Federal Reserve System, which was hijacked, from the plan of the experts, has to go away. I think Trump's in the process of doing that right now. And they're going to audit all that and recoup all the money that the Federal Reserve System has stolen from the people. It's got to be given back. In other words, Trump can't just go seize all that money from the Federal Reserve System and say, well, that's now for use for the government. Well, hell, it's not. Who'd they get it from? Federal Reserve didn't take that from the government. They took it from the people. So whose money is it? Who gets to decide what happens to all this money we've been putting into the system? We do. And so we have to be very careful about not just swapping one tyranny for another tyranny. That was my whole point of saying a lot of that stuff. Yeah. And so if this interim government, and Trump, right now is kind of, working with them and stuff like that, if they go take back over the Federal Reserve System and they recover all that money, whose money is it? Does it belong to the government? Does it belong to the interim government? Blah, blah, blah. No, it belongs to the people that it's taken from.
How does that work with the global debt facility?
Well, it doesn't. But what I'm saying is that, okay, so let's say that the interim government takes over the Federal Reserve. Let's say they find $1 trillion there, sitting there, that the Federal Reserve is hijacked. I would say they're entitled to a finder's fee and administrative costs on that $1 trillion. But who does the rest of it belong to?
Right. But the global debt facility, is there supposed to be?
No, don't bring in the global debt facility. It has nothing to do with what I'm saying here.
Okay.
All right. So again, fair is fair. Fair is fair. And so if the Federal Reserve has been stealing all this money from people, they didn't steal it from government. They stole it from people. And so whose money is it? Money belongs to people. So maybe, there's some kind of provisions with NESARA. Again, we can't see it. We can't read it. But there may be some facility in there to repatriate the money that's been stolen from people, to repatriate it back to the appropriate people. Now, what's been said on the internet about this quantum computer system they're going to go into, because there have been some speculation that there would be an account set up for all the people, and then all this money that's been stolen from them would be put into that account for people's use that they took it from. So maybe that's how it will be handled. But again, when you start to talk about, fair is fair. If a police officer,
could you take it off screen share while you're talking?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just they're looking at the letters, and there's nothing. Yeah, okay. They'd rather look at your face, I'm sure.
Well, I doubt that. But anyway, what I'm saying is, if a police officer goes and and arrests a burglar, and for instance, they arrest this burglar and they find out, they got cash, they got jewels, they got television sets, they got whatever. Isn't it the duty of the policeman to find out who those things belong to and return it to them?
Sure.
Well, yes, it is.
Sure.
So it's the same principle here that we're talking about. If they go and find and recover, let's say $1 trillion, those who go and recover it are certainly entitled to a wage, an administration, for doing it, and then perhaps even a finder's fee. Finder's fees are typically 6%, like we talked about in the past. And so they would be entitled to those things. But where should the rest of the money go to?
Hmm.
The people it was stolen from. And I think this new quantum computing system may, in fact, do that. So, like I say, this is speculation on my part, but it only makes good common sense because, again, we're trying to think what our world will be like on the other side of NESARA. So that's why, I'm kind of willing to speculate a little bit. I'm trying to look into the future. I'm trying to see how things are going to be. And so, again, when we start to talk about how will prosperity come to the country, well, how about giving them back all the money, giving the people back all the money that got stolen by the Federal Reserve System? How about we do that? And that'll bring prosperity, I guarantee you.
Well, like you said, I mean, there's many of those people maybe are no longer on this planet, and so then what do you do? And then you have
Well,
like
you would,
many siblings and
yeah,
families that branch off, and how do you?
I would think so.
Yeah, I guess there's many, where does a lineage end? If you can claim lineage to an estate, should you not be entitled to it? I mean, I can only imagine the kind of, the
Well,
kind of,
that's where equity is coming into the thought process. What
okay.
ought to be done with that money?
Hmm.
Again, both my parents are gone, but they paid into the system, all of their lives.
Yep.
I mean, certainly since 1933.
Hmm.
I mean, both my parents were born prior to 1933, but when 33 hit,
Hmm.
then all of a sudden they were involved in the new system. And so if you backdate, back to then, whatever. But my point is this: how do you bring prosperity to the country under NESARA? Give back to the people the money that's stolen from them. That'll bring prosperity in a great big hurry. You see
Sure.
what I mean?
Hmm.
I mean, we got people who are homeless living on the street. We got people, all kinds of different problems that people are having to face right now.
Hmm.
And but if all of a sudden they said, okay, now I got a bank account where I've got $100,000 in it, now I can afford someplace to stay. You see what I mean? So when we start to talk about prosperity, how are we going on the other side of NESARA? See, this is kind of the theme of what I'm saying. On the other side of NESARA,
Right.
what do we expect that we're going to find? And so I'm suggesting a few things that might, in fact, be on the other side. Because again, we talked about increased benefits to the elderly.
Mhm.
Well, if they're giving back all the money guys stole from them, for crying out loud, they can afford to live in a comfortable manner. And so, hopefully, when the Fed gets taken down, and it's not just a trillion, there's several trillions in there
Mhm.
that they've stolen, through income tax and all these other hidden taxes and all this crap. And so once those things are accounted for and returned to the people that it actually belongs to, where it rightfully belongs, then we'll see prosperity. And so, somebody, 75, 80 years old or something like that, living in a retirement home, and they're collecting their Social Security and they're getting poor treatment, all this kind of stuff. All of a sudden, they got a bank account that's got $500,000 in it. Now, what will they do?
Well, I
I
mean,
think
so
it's
you're
the point.
Well, and what you're saying too is that equity is about egalitarianism as well.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's about, finding a balance that it's not socialism.
No, it's not.
It's called egalitarianism, which kind of, begs the for some uh, equality,
Yeah, give back to the people the money that was stolen from them.
right.
And you won't have any mistreatment of the elderly at that point because most of them have become, all of a sudden rich.
Right. It's something that's equitable, in other words. So
It's fair.
egalitarianism is really more about what's equitable, and
Yeah.
exactly, and what's equitable in is what's fair, and exactly what's fair. But
Yeah.
but who gets to make that choice? What's fair, right?
Well, if people give them back their money,
Yeah.
then that's fair. And
No,
they
I
can go
mhm.
live, not have, old people not having to eat cat food.
Right, but that's why this didn't work in our present system because our present system was corrupted by money and power.
Yeah.
So what ought to have happened didn't happen. So that's why we don't want to repeat it. And it would be great that we go back to that concept of equity and egalitarianism for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's try to run through some more of these just so
Yeah.
we can, finish it up before it's over with here. Anyway, Apparently, they're going to say that they're going to restore financial privacy, which basically means, getting the government agencies out of your business. And then it said they're going to retrain all judges and attorneys in constitutional law. Well, I think that's a misstatement. Not going to. How are you going to retrain these guys if they're in prison? We got 45,000 sealed indictments. How many judges and attorneys do you think are going to escape that? And so, you ain't going to retrain them while they're in prison. But there are good, judges perhaps, and there are good attorneys and so forth. I've known some. And again, I'm not so much worried about them being retrained in constitutional law. Maybe common law concepts would be more appropriate than saying constitution, because there ain't no constitutional law. But retraining in common law concepts, retraining in equitable concepts and so forth, I think that would be more appropriate words to use than the way it's stated here. And so again, retraining is important. Getting them in the mindset, of justice. Like I say, we have that statue of that lady with the blindfold on holding those scales. Get back into that mindset. So what does it take to get there? Well, again, we have to get rid of all these stupid fraudulent statutes, all the rest of this garbage, get back to correct principles. And so again, like I say, responsible people, should take up those things. Now, the question gets to be, well, I'd have to philosophize, so I'm gonna get away from that.
Yeah.
Let's get into this next one here. It says cease all aggressive U.S. government military actions worldwide. Yeah, well, we're working on that now.
Right.
We're working on it now. I mean, we've been in Afghanistan now for 18 years?
Yeah, we've been everywhere, and it's not good. I mean, and
That's
again,
that's our longest running war is Afghanistan.
yeah, but we're there protecting poppy fields. It's not,
Exactly.
we're there for the wrong reason. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but the people didn't know that. People were not behind that. They were not told that's what they were, that's what they were there for. We've been lied to. And so, but a lot of people don't believe the government would lie to them. And that's why it's taking so long to make this transition.
Well, I think people are finding that out now.
Yeah. Well, they're not going to have any choice once all of this comes out about once people find out about who was really behind the Russian collusion and what that was about. And it wasn't Trump. No.
Well, let's look at this next one here. It says establishes peace throughout the world. Yeah, this is ever so much needed. Like I say, there is a worldwide movement now to get back to what's called nationalism. And again, people say, well, we shouldn't have borders, we shouldn't have this, we shouldn't have that. Well, we can't get to that until we have borders. Again, people keep complaining, yelling, screaming about this concept of Trump putting up a wall and all that kind of stuff. People think, well, it's to prevent illegal immigrants. That's part of it. Part of it is to keep the blankety blank drugs out of the country.
Right.
The next thing it's trying to prevent is to keep all this child trafficking across the borders.
Right.
I mean, I have to prevent myself from thinking about that, because when I start to visualize children being misused like that, I just come unglued.
Oh, you definitely don't want to look at the video that's out there.
I don't look at those things because, like I say, it puts me in so much internal trauma.
Yeah, no,
that I can't hardly even function.
No, it's mostly a gentleman explaining what was happening with Hillary Clinton and these snuff videos, and he only presents a still photo of this little girl for a few seconds.
I can't look at those things.
I understand. Well, you didn't know what you're going to look at till you see it, but I have to tell you that we're not really dealing with a breed of humans that we want living among us. That's all I can say.
That's right. So again, when we start to talk about world peace, you know, and the eventual taking down of borders. What the ETs, and I think the Venusians have even suggested this, is that you do have a one world government. You can still have nationalities, you can still have countries and all these kind of things, but in order to deal in the solar system, in the galaxy, and all these kind of things, as far as this planet goes, we need to have one spokesman with which everybody else agrees.
And that shouldn't be difficult. We have the Antarctic Treaty, which every country in the world has agreed and signed and participated to. So we
Mm-hmm.
already have a precedent set for that. That's at least public. I'm sure we have many that's
Yeah,
private, that we're not privy to. But we, you know, and that's another. There's a reason why the governments have all agreed on one, because these are where the infected, I would say, parasitic rulers come from. That's where they're living. So
yeah,
they come and infiltrate every government, and of course they're going to agree on that because it'll protect them and keep them keep them you know, protected and able to continue to control what goes on this planet. Those are
yeah. Well, what I personally, you
it's,
know, again,
the
this
evidence
is,
suggests. Yeah.
well, okay. You know, I'm always thinking about solutions
Yes.
to some of these things. And my solution, believe it or not, to this situation we're talking about here would be continental drift. And that is, I would like to see all the land mass move back to a tropic or subtropic area. See, one of the problems we have with division is because of the extremes
Mm,
in climate, believe it or not. And so we've got people that are living in tropical areas, we got people that are living in deserts, we got people that are living in forests, and all these different things, which would cause a natural division.
mhm. Sure.
But if the continents, and I believe this is perhaps the way it was originally, that is that the continents themselves would all drift, as it were, back to the equatorial plane, where everything was either tropic or subtropic, so that there was a continuity in climate, so that people's pursuits would be very, very much similar. Because when you got people living out here in the desert, you got people living in the rainforest, you got people living above the Arctic Circle. I mean, the diversity of climate is so extreme
Mm.
that how does an Eskimo relate to somebody riding on a camel?
True.
They
I mean,
can't.
true. We can't if for people. Of course, the cost of living is different in these regions as a
Oh,
result of
sure.
that as well. So it has to do with supply and demand, as you know. But it's like somebody in New York could not just simply build a hut and live, you know, there to protect themselves from the elements like they can down in Brazil or
Yeah.
you know some other equatorial area. Absolutely. And so therefore, you know, it's again, it's not about socialism, it's about egalitarianism. I don't know how that's going to happen, Winston, how because our
Well,
planet's
I
expanding
just
by 5%. I don't really know if we're
I'm just
going to
philosophizing
I see.
because, see, again, this planet right here has been a melting pot of the universe.
Right.
And that is, we have whole races of people who have come from different regions in the universe. I mean, we have people here. I mean, the people in India,
Mm,
they appear to be one of the oldest races on the planet. Then we have the people in the Orient, the Chinese. And then we have the Europeans. We have the races that that come from Africa and all these different places.
mm,
And so right there, we got a major problem as far as unification of the planet, and that's why I think that the recommendation would be, from the galactic, I mean, from the
mm,
Venusians and so forth, would be, yeah, you can maintain your national identities, but you need to have one who speaks for everybody on the planet. And so, again, in order to enter into a relationship, I mean, how are we going to make treaties with? See, this is what happened. I mean, Eisenhower made treaties. The Russians made treaties
mm,
with some of these ETs and everything, just like the people in the country was supposed to, to abide by the treaty that Eisenhower made with them dirty, filthy grays. And in consequence of that, people were being abducted against their will. They had no knowledge of it. And so the Greys were saying, well, we got a treaty, we can take these people. The people said, well, what in the hell treaty are you talking about?
Right.
And so again, for unification of the planet, I think because of the diversity of people who have come from different places in the universe to this planet, it may be necessary to maintain a national standard, but then the nations and the people would have to come to an agreement about who can represent this planet in the solar system and in this galaxy. Because, you can't have people from Russia making treaties with somebody from, wherever and expecting the rest of the planet to go along with it. It don't work. So again, the recommendation after we get, like I say, I'm looking on the other side of NESARA. The probability that the continents will drift back together is highly unlikely. So how we're going to solve the problem
Right.
of being able to enter the Galactic Federation, if you want to call it that, with the circumstance that we presently have. And so the suggestion's been made, okay, maintain your nationalities, but come to an agreement on someone who can speak for the whole planet. And I think that's what, we're looking at on the other side of NESARA. Perhaps the United States would be a leader in that kind of thing, but I'm telling you, it ain't going to be the United Nations. They're corrupt as hell.
Right.
And so how are we going to get past those kind of problems? And that's the real question that we'll have to face. And so the various statesmen, not politicians, the various statesmen, from the various regions representing, different groups of people and so forth would have to sit down and come up with a formula, for representation in the solar system, in the galaxy and so forth, that everybody would agree to, at least in principle.
Yeah, but so much of that is embedded in commerce, though, as you know, as you well know, Winston. And I think a lot of that is, it's that's what we're
Yeah.
dealing with. I mean, it's all
Well,
about commerce, which is really what's driving this. And,
but we're getting better at it, I think. Like I say,
intergalactic commerce, interplanetary commerce. This has all been going on. Of course, been kept from most surface population, but that
well,
is what's driving some of the crime on this planet. Yeah.
the solution I see to what you're postulating about there would be free energy devices, food replicators, and other things.
Hmm.
See again, I mean, how did the Eskimos get access to bananas? They don't. You see, but if they had food replicators, if they had energy devices and so forth that they could rely upon,
Right.
then the element of getting bananas all the way from Brazil to the Arctic Circle
Yeah.
all of a sudden diminishes. And so if the people want to remain in the Arctic Circle, let them go ahead and do it. But they're not depending upon boats coming in from Brazil to bring them bananas.
True. It would be great if we all had like this little book, like, little booklet like this that had, a code for a certain food, and you just punch it into your replicator, boom, there it
Yeah,
goes.
well, they have those. See,
Yeah,
this is
well,
what this
that's
is
what
one
we
of the
need.
reasons. This is one of the reasons that a lot of those sealed indictments are going to gather up some of these people from the patent offices
Oh, yes.
because they've suppressed all this.
Yes, there are implants in those patent offices, and whenever there was a patent for these free energy devices, it would get swiped. We reported on this, I think, in one of the POTUS reports, where I screen shared this very large list of people who were likely, included on the indictments when the first indictment list started to come out, and it definitely had a lot of people from the patent office on there.
Oh yeah.
um, infiltrators of the Obama administration, and
Well,
even going back.
another thing that happened, and Trump's getting after him over this,
Yeah,
and that is that a lot of these patents that came in was simply sent right back out to the Chinese. And that's what Trump's getting after him about stealing all of our technology through the patent office.
hmm,
And this I was talking to a fellow from India, and he was kind of, in the upper elite there in India and stuff, but he was complaining
right,
that we send our students to the universities, we train them, they become very proficient as engineers or whatever, and automatically the Chinese come and offer them a lot of money, and they immigrate from India to China. He said they're stealing all of our intellectual property. And so again, Chinese need to get their pardon me, they need to get their stuff put together straight, because the people on the planet not putting up with their uh, thievery much longer. A lot of, I mean, I know so much about what's happened with the Chinese bonds and all the things they did, so they could get in this RV to get the Chinese yuan to sit on top of the pile and become technically the world's reserve currency, and they
right.
cheated and lied their way to get it there. And there's not very many people at those levels who don't know that. The Chinese better get it figured out pretty quick, or they're going to be in, in some real trouble. Put it that way, because they've lied, cheated their way to the top.
Well, people have to stop taking the cash, and sadly, on this planet, that's how this planet has been operating up to this point. And if people stop buying, selling out to these patents to the Chinese,
Uh-huh.
that's where did the nationalism go? Do you know what I mean? So that's the
Yeah,
problem. It's like, what somebody does affects the whole country. Someone who has some kind of really, if they're really, inventing it for humanitarian purposes to benefit the quality of life of people, why would you want to sell out? I mean, you know,
yeah. So again, like I say, we're kind of running to the end of our program
yeah,
here. And the thing today, I mean, we've talked about a lot of little foibles and different things, that go on and stuff. But my main thrust, what I wanted to do,
mm,
was to get the listeners thinking,
right,
not about NESARA, but about what's going to happen on the other side of NESARA.
mm,
And we need to start preparing, for that eventuality, because NESARA is going to get announced. There's going to be a new election. There's going to be all kinds of things that are happening. And so, how will the people live? How will they act on the other side of NESARA? NESARA is set in stone. It's going to happen.
yeah. But Winston, some of that is definitely, and I think you did a great job, and I appreciate that today because it has definitely created a conversation. At least it's getting the conversation going. I hope it doesn't end here with our Goldfish report. I hope you take these concepts and principles and you discuss it with your neighbors, with your friends, in your chat groups, in your Facebook groups, and all these other things. Because, the bottom line is, if people continue to sit back passively and not participate in this process, everything will be dictated to you. I mean, good and bad. We can't
Yeah.
allow that to continue to happen, Winston. So, one of the things that we need to do is how, people have to start realizing that their input is not only necessary, but it's obligatory. You must, this is a society where you have to contribute one way or another, even if it's only your vote. But will the vote count in the future, and how, so will we be given an option, a choice, and what will that choice look like, and how will the people's will be represented? How will the
Yeah.
will of the people be represented? And that's, where the policy process, came from. And that has to play a role in this, Winston. I mean, it's great that all these great minds have all these plans, but it's how can the people be sure that they're being represented, and it's not going to be more of the same old, where it's just lip service and politicians don't deliver. And there's no reason why we're spending billions of dollars in military and all this when we still have people who cannot eat, who can't get to food, who have disabilities and can't literally get to food, people who can't find a home, can't afford clothing. This is This is an inversion of the principles that our country and what at least the people who live here believe our country is about. So if we don't participate, it's, you're going to have it dictated to us. And we can't let that happen. We can't repeat that, I think is what you're also trying to say. Have the
Yeah.
conversation about these subjects. What do you want to see? And a lot of people say, be the change you want to see. So how is this going to be reflected? How are you going to adapt? And how will life look after NESARA? And a lot of that has to do with making sure you are informed on what's going to happen. So that's their obligation, these planners, Winston, to inform us of what this is and what our options are.
Yeah.
Because we do have the system set up to vote. We can have our will, but we have to know. We have to have this, unveiling of all this. We have to be assured that there's no way that we're going to be able to repeat that because of a new kind of system, not just financial, but because of a new way of the people's will to be expressed.
Yeah. What are you going to do when our whole public education system changes?
I'm going to jump for joy because this
Yeah.
this Common Core is creating nothing but zombies, man. Let me tell you, it's amazing. And go to our Facebook page, our news page, because we printed a post. We published a post showing examples of the incredibly asinine way to teach mathematics to kids that thoroughly confuse them, so that you can't even answer the question if you know it. If you know mentally how to solve it, you can't get credit for it. You have to show how they teach it. It's really the
I
worst.
know.
It's indoctrination in an extreme form of manipulation that we really, you have to, folks get it for free, like you said, Winston. It's paid for by our property taxes, but many
We
people,
think.
well, we think, right? But it's that's the problem, is that they're just going to accept whatever, you know
Yeah, we're going
is
to have
given.
free schools after NESARA. I don't think so.
And not only that, they're shoving this kind of, they're shoving this transgender agenda down the throats of children and down the minds of children in the school. They're exposing them to, you know, I'm telling you, Winston, it's horrible. They're demonstrating to sixth graders how to use dildos and how to have anal sex. And I'm telling you right now, folks, you just keep sleeping at the wheel, and it's all going to be taken away from us. You just have to be participating. Do the referendums like Winston's talking about. If you don't like a public official, if you don't like what they're doing, get them the heck out of there. It's up to us. It is up to us. We cannot sit back any longer and allow this tyranny. How much are we going to take before we actually get to the point where we start to stand up? When it's too late, I hope not. I really hope not.
Well, let's kind of end this on a humorous note. I'll tell a funny story and then we'll stop all this. Anyway, it's really a funny story. It's a true story. A fella I knew, he had a couple of little boys. I think maybe they're like 7 and 5, and so they were doing a homeschool kind of thing. So he was sitting there at his computer one day, and so the wife had the kids, working on their arithmetic and all this kind of stuff in their homeschool. So he was sitting there at his computer, kind of halfway, looking at his computer, listening to what they were saying. So he listened to this one little boy. He was reciting his arithmetic.
Mm-hmm.
He said, 1 plus 1, some bitch, 2. The guy said, what? And he kept listening. So 2 plus 2, some bitch, 4. And at that, he jumped up and run back there. So his wife said, what in the world are you teaching these kids about? Said they're cussing and all this. Because she said, no. She said, get the wax out of your ears. What the kid really said was 1 plus 1, the sum of which is 2. 2 plus 2, the sum of which is 4. he, he just he just he just didn't hear what the kid was saying. He thought he was saying son of a bitch.
That's pretty funny, Winston. That's pretty funny. No, I
So you
really
got
thought
you got to listen a little bit more careful to what kids are saying.
that was really funny. Thank you so
Uh,
much for
just,
for
just
that.
have just have a little laugh to get out of this.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful. Thank you so much, and I hope our viewers appreciate that. You've got some good sense of humor there, Winston. So thank you very much. And this is a great way to start off the weekend. It's Friday, and lots of
Yeah, I
crazy
mean,
things.
lighten up a little bit.
Yeah, we wish our prayers to all the people in Hawaii with this hurricane here because it's really making a very strange path. We hope everybody's safe and protected, and and to all the people experiencing these major, world changes right now. We hope everybody is safe, and we pray for your safety. So, thank you so much, Winston. It was good to see you again, and thank you for this worldly wisdom for which we cannot move forward without. So
Just
thank you
trying to
very
get
much.
people to think a little bit.
Yep, thinking. So now, folks, we want to remind you again that our blog was deleted. So in this major fascist move of censorship with the social media giants, this is the reality of it. And of course, they showed by force that across platforms they could do this. They did it to Alex Jones. So I think at this point we need to see what because it affects the president as well and his ability to get information out. Don't be surprised if you see some more, uh, an increase, I would say, in chaos, because that's really what's happening. But we will get through it. We have to stick together. We are a brother's keeper. Look out for one another. And have a great weekend. And we'll be back with more Country Roads next week. We'll be back on Monday with our POTUS report. We have some great interviews coming up, folks. Really interesting things that I don't want to talk about just yet, but I will announce it when it's a little bit closer. And I hope everyone has a great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for viewing. This concludes this edition of the GoldFish Report.